It started with silence, the kind you don't notice at first because life is already loud in other ways. Breakfast dishes, school runs, unread emails, my partner asking what's for dinner like nothing ever changes. My daughter used to fill the house with noise, music leaking from her room, half-finished jokes, arguments about curfew. Then, slowly, she didn't. I remember thinking she was just growing up, pulling away like kids do. I even told myself I should be proud of her independence. Back then, everything felt stable enough. My relationship wasn't perfect, but it was functional. We had routines. Shared calendars. Shared bills. Shared silence that didn't yet feel like distance. My daughter was in school doing fine, as she always said when I asked too many questions. I didn't see anything wrong. Or maybe I refused to. Looking back now, I realized normal was just the word I used for things I hadn't paid attention to closely enough. That was before she stopped coming home on time. Before the school called. Before everything collapsed. Our life had been built on small compromises that I mistook for stability. I worked long hours, convincing myself it was for her future. My partner, Mark, handled most of the day-to-day school communication because I trusted him with it. He had this calm way of speaking that made everything sound under control. My daughter, Emily, was quiet but not distant back then. She used to sit with Mark at the kitchen counter talking about music, games, random internet trends I didn't understand. I thought it was good, they bonded easily. I was relieved, honestly. I told myself she needed another adult figure in her life besides me always hovering. There were small things I ignored. Emily laughing at messages she didn't want me to see. Mark suddenly becoming more understanding about teenage boundaries. Late-night conversations that stopped when I walked in. I dismissed it all. I had work stress, fatigue, and the belief that trust meant not questioning too much. That belief would become the thing that destroyed everything. The first real shift was subtle. Emily started waking up late for school. Then missing classes. Then lying about assignments. When I asked, she'd snap at me with a kind of anger that didn't feel like normal teenage rebellion. It felt heavier, practiced almost. Mark told me to give her space. He said teenagers go through phases, that pressure from me was making it worse. I listened to him more than I listened to my gut. That's something I still hate admitting. She began spending hours locked in her room. Headphones on constantly. Laughing at her phone in a way that felt disconnected from reality, like she was reacting to someone I couldn't see. When I asked who she was talking to, she said, "No one important." I remember standing outside her door one night, hearing her whispering. Not crying. Not talking like a teenager. It sounded coached. Like someone was guiding her tone. I told myself I was overthinking. That paranoia is just what happens when you're a tired parent. I was wrong. The day she dropped out of school, it didn't feel real at first. I got a call from the administration asking why Emily hadn't been attending classes for over a week. A week. I didn't even know. I confronted her immediately. She didn't deny it. She just looked at me with this strange calm, like she had rehearsed the moment. "I'm not going back," she said. I asked why. She said school was toxic and pointless. Her words didn't sound like hers. They sounded like phrases lifted from somewhere else. Mark came home during the argument. Instead of being surprised, he looked tense. Too controlled. He said we should respect her decision and figure out alternative education paths. That's when something inside me cracked. Because he wasn't confused. He wasn't shocked. He was prepared. Emily refused to discuss it further. She went back to her room. Mark went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water like nothing had happened. I stood there realizing I was the only one panicking. I started digging. Quietly at first, then obsessively. Her phone was locked down tighter than ever, but I noticed patterns. Certain names she reacted to. Certain apps she closed too quickly when I entered the room. One name kept coming up indirectly. R. At first I thought it was a friend. Then I saw screenshots left open on her laptop one night. Messages that were wrong. Not explicitly inappropriate, but emotionally intense. Directive. Like someone shaping her thoughts step by step. Your home doesn't understand you. You're more mature than they think. You don't need permission to choose your path. And always signed with a simple R. When I showed Mark, he went pale for a second too long. Then he said it was probably some online influencer. He dismissed it too fast. That reaction told me more than the messages did. I began watching Emily more closely. And I started noticing something even worse. She wasn't just being influenced. She was being isolated. Strategically. And Mark was somehow orbiting it instead of stopping it. I finally confronted Emily properly one night. I blocked her doorway and told her we were talking, no escape, no phone. She didn't yell. That was the worst part. She just sighed like I was exhausting her. I asked her who R was. Her expression changed instantly, defensive, sharp. She said I was invading her privacy. I said I was trying to protect her. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "He understands me. You don't." That sentence hit harder than I expected. I asked where she met him. She hesitated. Just a fraction too long. Online, she said. Through a learning community. Mark walked in halfway through the conversation and immediately told me to calm down. Not her. Me. That moment still replays in my head. Because it wasn't just disagreement, it felt coordinated. Like I was the outsider in my own home. Emily shut the conversation down and left. Mark told me I was making her worse. And I realized I was suddenly alone in trying to pull her back. I found out R wasn't just an influencer or mentor. He had a name, Roman. He ran private online guidance sessions for teens, framed as academic coaching and personal development. Emily had been attending them for months. But what shocked me more was discovering Mark had known about Roman long before I did. Not only known, he had helped set up access through a friend at work. That's what he finally admitted when I pressed him hard enough. I remember the exact moment he said it. He avoided my eyes and said, "I thought it would help her confidence." My stomach went cold. Roman wasn't just influencing Emily. He was isolating her from me, step by step, reinforcing that I was the problem. And Mark had opened the door. When I tried to stop the sessions, Emily exploded emotionally for the first time in weeks. Screaming, crying, accusing me of control, manipulation, sabotage. And Mark stood behind her. Not stopping it. Not correcting her. Just watching me like I was already defeated. The betrayal didn't hit all at once. It came in layers. First, my daughter rejecting me. Then my partner defending the person influencing her. Then the realization that I had been excluded from decisions about my own child. But the worst part came later, when I found messages between Mark and Roman. Not just coordination. Familiarity. Trust. And something that made my hands shake. Personal messages that didn't belong in any professional context. Emotional closeness. Late-night conversations. Shared frustrations about me. It wasn't just influence anymore. It was alignment. I confronted Mark and he didn't even fully deny it. He said I was too rigid. That Roman helped him understand Emily better than I ever did. That was the moment I stopped hearing him as my partner. I walked out of the room shaking, not from anger, but from the sudden realization that I was no longer inside my own family structure. I was outside of it, looking in. And Emily, she had already chosen which version of reality she believed. The days after that were a blur of tension and silence. I tried to reach Emily again, but every attempt ended the same way, cold refusal or emotional shutdown. She stopped eating meals with me. Stopped answering questions about school or her plans. Her world had narrowed to her room, her phone, and whatever Roman was feeding her through a screen. Mark told me to step back, or I'd lose her completely. But I already felt like I was losing her every second I stayed quiet. I started sleeping badly. Not because of noise, but because of thought loops I couldn't escape. Replaying conversations, looking for the moment I failed. Was it when I trusted Mark too much? When I worked too late? When I dismissed the first warning signs? Emily stopped calling me Mom in conversation. It became just my name, or nothing at all. And still, Mark insisted everything was under control. That phrase started to make me nauseous. Control was exactly what I no longer had. The breaking point came when I discovered Emily had tried to leave home. Not metaphorically. Literally. A packed bag. Cash missing from my wallet. A train schedule open on her laptop. And a message from Roman. "You're ready. We've arranged everything." I confronted her immediately. She didn't deny it. She just said she was finally choosing her life. I asked where she thought she was going. She said she didn't need to tell me. Mark tried to intervene, but this time I didn't let him redirect it. I demanded answers. Loudly. For the first time, I stopped trying to be calm. Emily started crying, not because she was stopping, but because she felt interrupted. That's when I realized how far gone things had become. She wasn't reacting to me anymore. She was reacting against me, as if I were an obstacle rather than her parent. And Mark, he looked exhausted, but not surprised. Like this outcome had already been written somewhere I hadn't been allowed to read. After that night, everything fractured. Emily refused to speak to me directly. Communication went through Mark, which felt like a final erasure of my role as her mother. I could hear her voice sometimes through the walls, laughing at something on her phone, and it felt like she was living in a parallel house. Mark suggested family therapy, but only after things escalated beyond repair. That detail mattered. It wasn't prevention, it was damage control. I went anyway, alone at first. The therapist asked questions I didn't have clean answers to. How long had I felt excluded? When did I start noticing changes? The truth was, I had noticed. I just didn't act fast enough. At home, Emily became colder. Not angry anymore, detached. That scared me more. Mark and I barely spoke except logistics. The intimacy we had was gone, replaced by strategic silence. And Roman's presence, though never physical, felt like a third person living in every conversation. I started realizing this wasn't just a family crisis. It was a restructuring. And I was the only one resisting it. One night, I finally accessed Emily's messages. I know I shouldn't have. But I did. What I found wasn't just manipulation, it was systematic reshaping of identity. Roman telling her she was awakening, encouraging her to cut emotional ties that held her back, framing me as an obstacle to her growth. But worse were the emotional dependencies he created. Praise, validation, exclusivity. And Mark was there in those threads too. Not always directly, but participating in the framing. Reinforcing trust. It wasn't just betrayal, it was collaboration. I confronted Mark again. This time there was no denial. He said he didn't see harm in it, and that I was too emotional to understand the bigger picture. That sentence broke something permanent in me. Because it meant I wasn't just excluded. I was being reclassified as unreliable. Emily, meanwhile, had started referring to Roman's guidance as truth. And I realized I was no longer competing with a person. I was competing with a belief system inside my own child. The confrontation that ended everything happened in the kitchen. Emily said she was leaving again. This time with certainty. No hesitation. She told me I had failed to support her evolution. I asked her if she understood what she was doing. She said yes. Mark stood beside her, silent. I remember asking him directly, "Do you hear yourself? Do you hear what this is doing to her?" He didn't answer. That silence was louder than any argument. Emily said she would contact me when she was ready, then walked toward the door. I didn't stop her physically. I couldn't. Something in me knew that force would make me the villain in a story already being written without me. The door closed. And just like that, she was gone. Not kidnapped. Not missing. Just redirected away from me. After Emily left, the house didn't feel empty, it felt erased. Mark moved out 2 weeks later. Quietly. No fight. No resolution. Just logistics and boxes. I stayed in the same place, surrounded by objects that no longer felt anchored to anything real. I tried calling Emily. No response. Messages unread. Occasionally, I'd see glimpses of her online presence, carefully curated, distant, like a life photographed from far away. Roman's influence never stopped. If anything, it became more polished, more absolute. I started therapy again, alone. I had to reconstruct what had actually happened, piece by piece, because my memory kept trying to soften it. There were days I blamed myself entirely. Other days I blamed Mark so completely I couldn't think straight. Mostly, I just missed my daughter in a way that had nowhere to go. And I hated that love didn't feel like enough to pull her back. It's been months now, and I still don't have a resolution that feels like closure. Emily is technically safe, according to the last message I received through a mutual contact. But safety isn't the same as presence. She has built a life I'm not part of. Mark is gone from it too, though I suspect he still watches from a distance I don't understand. I keep replaying everything, searching for the exact moment I could have changed the outcome. But there isn't just one. There are hundreds of small failures that only make sense in hindsight. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever come back to herself, or if this version of her will become permanent. I don't know if I lost her to influence, to betrayal, or to my own blindness. Maybe all three. What I do know is this: trust, once redirected, is almost impossible to reclaim. And I live every day with the quiet fear that one day she'll look back and believe I simply stopped loving her when she needed it most.